Hey there, today let's make ice cream sandwiches. There are two recipes that come together to make ice cream sandwiches. One is the cookie part of the ice cream sandwich, and two is the ice cream part of the ice cream sandwich. Feel free to make either or the ice cream sandwich. Today we're making pumpkin pie themed ice cream sandwiches, but they obviously don't have to be. The cookie part of our sandwich is going to be a pumpkin spice graham cracker. We're going to start by adding our dry ingredients into a food processor. Add 1 cup of whole wheat flour. Use graham flour if you have it, but it's quite difficult to find, so we just use whole wheat flour. And instead, add 1/4 cup of all-purpose white flour. To that, we're going to add our spices. We will have 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/8 teaspoon of cloves, nutmeg, and allspice, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. If you have powdered ginger, you can add 1/2 teaspoon of powdered ginger as well. Alternatively, if you have pumpkin spice, instead of adding the cloves, nutmeg, allspice, ginger, and cinnamon, you can go ahead and add 2.5 teaspoons of pumpkin spice. To that, we'll add 1/2 cup of lightly packed dark brown sugar. Mix until fully incorporated. At this point, it doesn't matter how much you mix this. Once we add liquid, we need to be very careful about overmixing. To that, we're going to add 1/2 of a cup of very cold, unsalted, cubed butter. It's important that the butter is very cold. In my case, I'll take the butter and chop it up and then toss it around a tiny bit in flour. That will make it so the little cubes stop sticking to each other, and they will be easier to evenly incorporate into the flour mixture. I'll put it in the freezer until I'm ready to use it. There's a reason why we want very cold butter in a recipe like this. This is a rolled dough cookie. The butter helps to solidify the dough, so it's easier to roll, it's easier to cut. I use more European style butter, so it has a higher butterfat content, which means that when it gets cold, it's harder and it's easier to work with. I would suggest something like Kellygold or Plugra. We want to go ahead and pulse the butter in until it's fully incorporated. Now, because I didn't have powdered ginger, I used fresh ginger, in which I actually kind of prefer using fresh ginger. So this is just freshly grated out of the freezer. I would say it's probably about 2 tablespoons. 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract. I don't have vanilla extract, but I do have fresh vanilla beans. So I just scraped the inside of 1 fresh vanilla bean, 1/8 cup of honey, and 1/8 cup of milk. I am using full fat 2% milk. Blend until fully incorporated. This doesn't exactly form a dough in the blender, so you just need to sort of eyeball the idea that they are fully blended together, and it is probably workable. This is what it looks like. On a piece of parchment, let's go ahead and shape the dough so it's in the form of kind of a ball, flatten it out a little bit, and then place a piece of parchment on top of that. We're going to roll this out this way. So if you have a silicone mat, you want to go ahead and put it underneath this because it will stop this from slipping and make it much easier to roll out. We want to roll this into a nice sheet of dough. We want it to be about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch thick. If your dough starts to feel too soft, if you start seeing melted butter fat, you want to put this in the fridge or the freezer right away. Let it sit for about 10 minutes, take it out, and then you can go ahead and start working with it again. You don't want the butter in here to melt because you will end up with a greasy, oily cookie at the end. Because we're cutting our graham crackers into rounds, I'm not overly concerned with getting a perfect square-edged rectangle. Once it's fully rolled out, we'll go ahead and place it on a cookie sheet and we'll put it in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes. 30 minutes later, the dough is nice and stiff. We're going to peel the parchment off of one side, flip it over, peel the parchment off the other side. If necessary, you can lightly dust your working surface with flour. I'm using a 3¼ inch round cutter. I cut out about 11 rounds out of this. You can reform the dough, roll it out again, and cut some more rounds if you need them. I don't really need that many ice cream sandwiches. Or you can take the scraps, reform them, roll them out again, and cut into whatever kind of shapes you want. I had these cute leaves and acorns that I cut out in the hopes to be able to snack on some graham crackers later. We need to poke some holes in our cookies, so I am using a metal chopstick. I do not recommend metal chopsticks for eating. If you know, you know. But I do recommend them for putting holes in graham crackers. So I'm just going to poke a hole in the center, and then I'm going to try to evenly kind of go around and put 5 holes around that, etc., and just keep going until I have a nice hole pattern. I'm going to refrigerate again for another 15 to 30 minutes while preheating the oven to 350 degrees. We'll bake these in the middle of the oven for about 10 to 15 minutes. We do not want to get color on them, so we're not trying to brown them or anything. Just as soon as they start getting a little bit of color around the edges, they're done. Allow them to completely cool before trying to remove them from the pan. If you try to remove them from the pan at this stage, you will just end up with a hot, fall apart kind of mess. As for my little snack shapes, they mystically turned into chocolate graham crackers in the oven.
Nobody's gonna know.
They're gonna know. How would they know?
Moving on to the pumpkin pie ice cream. You can use a 15-ounce can of pumpkin puree, or alternatively, if you would like to be an overachiever, you can get a pumpkin pie pumpkin. And it really should be a pumpkin pie pumpkin. Do not use pumpkins that are for carving. They have a completely different texture, flavor profile, sugar content. And you just want to cut the bottom off so that it is stable. Cut it in half, remove the seeds, and then you can cut the top off. Cut it into larger chunks, put some salt on it, put it in a roasting dish with the cover on, roast at 350 degrees for approximately 45 minutes to 1 hour until it is fork soft and immashable. You want to remove the peels and mash it up and allow it to cool completely. For the ice cream base, we're using full fat everything, and we're heating this up even though it is an American style ice cream, meaning that there's no eggs in it. That would be a custard style or a French style, European style ice cream. We're going to start with 320 grams of whole fat milk. On a low temperature, we want to heat this just until we can see steam rising off of the top of the milk. To that, we will add 160 grams of dark brown sugar and 60 grams of plain white sugar. By heating this, what we're allowing to happen is the sugar will dissolve completely and we'll end up with a creamier ice cream. It won't have a grainy texture. Add 1/2 of a teaspoon of salt, 1/2 of a teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/8 of a teaspoon of nutmeg, cloves, and allspice. And if you have powdered ginger, you can go ahead and use powdered ginger here. You can add 1/2 of a teaspoon of powdered ginger. Alternatively, you can once again skip all of the individual spices and use pumpkin pie spice. I would recommend about 1.5 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice. Add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Again, I do not have vanilla extract. I do have fresh vanilla beans. So I will add the inside of 2 fresh vanilla beans. I'm also going to add the scraped vanilla pod beans into the warm milk and allow them to steep and remove them before cooling. The other reason why we heated the milk and add the spices in is because the warmth of the milk will help release the spices' flavors. To that, we will add 700 grams of heavy cream. Because I didn't have powdered ginger, I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of freshly grated frozen ginger here. Heat until steaming once again, and then add in about 475 grams of pumpkin, or 1 15-ounce can of pumpkin puree. Now, they aren't actually equal. It just happens to be that the grammage of my particular pie pumpkin was 475 grams. So a little bit under is not really going to hurt anything. You want to heat this and stir in the pumpkin until the pumpkin is incorporated. You don't want any like big chunky stringy bits or anything in there. So just warm it and stir it until it's really nicely incorporated throughout. Make sure you taste your ice cream base. because if your ice cream base tastes good, your ice cream is going to taste good. Let the mixture cool at room temperature, and once it is cold enough, store it in the refrigerator for 2 hours. I'm going to use the KitchenAid ice cream attachment to churn the ice cream. The ice cream bowl needs to be in the freezer for 24 hours, so it is not something that you can just use. You do have to plan a little bit ahead of time before you can use this attachment. Today I'm using my 6-quart stand mixer instead of my 5-quart stand mixer. What's really cool about this attachment is that it fits a 5-quart tilt head stand mixer, and it also fits a 6-quart bowl lift style stand mixer. And I rarely get to use the bigger one just because I usually don't have enough of whatever I'm making to warrant using the larger one. We're going to turn the mixer on to stir before adding in the ice cream base. I guess this is very important because if you add the ice cream base before you turn on the mixer, it can break it. Slowly add in the ice cream base, and you can see how this works. The cold bowl freezes the ice cream base that touches it, and then the paddle comes around and scrapes that off. And it just keeps doing that over and over and over until you have a soft serve ice cream. This whole churning process took about 25 minutes. This wasn't the full ice cream base either. I took about 2 cups of this out for something else. And so I do want to point out the amount of volume that is increasing here with the ice cream. So that's something to be aware of, because at the time that this was done, I want to say that this bowl was maybe only like half full of the base. And by the time that it finished, it was kind of overflowing out of the bowl. Once that's done, we have to do this very quickly because we don't want the ice cream in the sandwiches to melt. So we're just going to take our graham cracker rounds and we're going to place a large dollop of ice cream right in the middle. We're going to put the top on and we're going to sandwich it down until it's about even. And then using the spoon, we're just going to go around the outside edge and scrape off the excess ice cream. Set that aside in a container that is freezer ready so that we can get these into the freezer as quickly as possible. And we're just going to keep repeating that process. I didn't make a ton of ice cream sandwiches here again because I can't eat all these ice cream sandwiches. So I only made 5 ice cream sandwiches. Okay, so that's a dirty lie. I can eat all of these ice cream sandwiches. I just shouldn't eat all of these ice cream sandwiches. Let me do that one more time. Again, just a large dollop, sandwich, and then with a spoon, go around and scrape the outside. This is the reason why we made the cookies round. You can make them square or rectangular and use the exact same technique, but it's just easier if they're round. Once they're done, you want to get them into the freezer for at least 2 hours before eating, or you can freeze them overnight, which is what I chose to do. If you don't want to eat all of that excess ice cream, you probably want to store it in the freezer. So go ahead and take something like a bread baking loaf pan or something similarly shaped, line it with saran wrap, and I was actually using real saran wrap. Scoop the ice cream into it, cover it with the saran wrap, and then just store it in the freezer. Before eating or serving, allow them to sit out for about 15 to 20 minutes. That allows the ice cream to soften up a little bit, as well as the graham cracker. It's absolutely delicious. The cookie part of it is wonderfully, wonderfully spiced. You definitely know that it's graham cracker, and you definitely know that there is pumpkin spice in there. It's not overwhelming or overpowering. The ice cream part just tastes like pumpkin pie. Like, truly, it really just tastes like pumpkin pie. It's actually a little bit trippy how much like pumpkin pie it tastes. There is a commercial ice cream that was out there that I tried. I think it was last year, the year before that, and it was pumpkin pie ice cream. And I thought, what a wonderful idea. So I bought some of it and I thought it was really good. But there was one problem that I had with that ice cream is that there was so much nutmeg in the ice cream that it actually made it kind of taste like soap. This does not taste like that. It legitimately, really and truly just tastes like pumpkin pie. And you can taste all of the wonderful warm pumpkin pie spices in it and everything. I have a niece who is obsessed with pumpkin pie. So obsessed with pumpkin pie that she actually asked for a pumpkin pie for Christmas one year. Just a whole pumpkin pie just for herself. That was the most amazing thing in the world. But that niece would absolutely love these. I would make the graham cracker part of this just to make it, just because I think it's wonderful. And I would also make the ice cream part of this just because I think it's wonderful. I have a very difficult time resisting ice cream sandwiches. It is by far my favorite sandwich. It's ridiculous, really. So I do not buy ice cream sandwiches because I can't stop eating them. I would make these ice cream sandwiches for special occasions in a group setting because I am not going to be able to resist eating all of these.
Nobody's gonna know.
They're gonna know.
How would they know? How would they know? How would they know?
I can't.
I can't. Oh my God.